Well, good evening, folks, and welcome to the inaugural episode of When It Was Real. This is a podcast that will be dedicated to the rich and glorious history of the Worldwide Wrestling Federation in the 1970s. I am Benny Scala, the one and only Playa, and with me is the true star of the show, noted WWWF historian and author of the marvelous book for which the show is named, When It Was Real, Mr. Nikita Breznikov. Nikita, for one, I'm really excited to be taking a trip in the, let's find it here, the Wrestling Wayback Machine, and going back to a time, well, when it was real. So
I love it, Benny. That's great.
Thanks so much for being a part of this.
I'm honored, and thank you for everything that you and everyone, like Monte, everybody that's been a part of this. It's an honor, and I'm excited. Let's talk to wrestling.
Let's do it. Well, before we, as much as I want to get started, we've got a little business to take care of. I know this is going to be a great show, and I know we have a great sponsor. So, folks, after we pay the bills, we're going to be back to talk about When It Was Real, and hopefully I did this right. This is Benny Scala, the one and only Playa. Folks, I am beyond excited to be co-hosting this new show, When It Was Real. And I am just as excited to be announcing our new sponsor, the Free Spirited Company. Free Spirited is a phenomenal old-school clothing company that specializes in short and long-sleeve T-shirts, hoodies, tank tops, graphic tees, and even yoga pants. These T-shirts are, to quote Rocky's manager Mickey Goldmill, a wake of art. Yours truly will be rocking the Free Spirited merch on each and every episode of When It Was Real. Not only are these shirts eye-catching, but they are very comfortable as well. Like what you see? Please go to Free Spirited or shopfreespirited.com and use our special code MP20 to receive a 20% on all purchases. Again, that is shopfreespirited.com and the code is MP20. As the poet laureate of the Monte and the Pharaoh YouTube channel, I will leave you with this. If you like what you see, go buy a tee. Heck, maybe even 2 or 3. When your friends tell you, hey, you look like the bomb, send them over to shopfreespirited.com. Well, I guess Lanny Papa has nothing to worry about. But Nikita, we decided to do our initial episode on a true wrestling legend, Chief Jay Strongbow, the pride of Pawhuska, Oklahoma. And now you might have to correct me here and there, but according to WrestlingData.com, Jay Strongbow first appeared in a WWWF ring in July of 1970, defeating the Continental Nobleman Joe Turco in a TV match on July 9th. Now, did I get that right?
That's the best I can find myself, Benny, and I've searched high and low. Then the next day in Madison Square Garden, his debut there, same thing, beat Joe Turco, the Continental Nobleman.
All right. Well, and he goes on to become insanely popular. That's an understatement. And he falls into the number 2 babyface slot behind then champion Bruno Sammartino. And before we get into his amazing WWWF run, I want to take the Wayback Machine back a few years. And according to that same website, WrestlingData.com, a gentleman named Luigi Scarpa wrestled in Baltimore on May 1st, 1956. Same guy?
No. Not that I know of. If anybody can correct me, please do. But I do not think so because, as we know, before he became chief, he was Joe the Rebel Scarpa down in Georgia. And we wrestled all throughout Mid-Atlantic, all that area there. So, no, I don't think that was in his, even as Luigi Scarpa. No, I don't believe so.
The time frame would fit, 1956. I mean, he would have been definitely old enough. You know, Baltimore is not too far from Jersey, but yeah, I don't know why he wouldn't just go by Joe. You know, why Luigi? That'd be a bit of a stretch.
Yes.
All right. Well, so it appears that the Chief started wrestling under his given name, like we just said, Joe Scarpa, in 1958, and for the next dozen years, he wrestled in several territories. Although the majority of his success prior to the WWWF was in Florida and Georgia. And in fact, he won the NWA Florida Heavyweight Championship, defeating a true legend in Johnny Valentine on December 5th, 1968. Now, this is, I did not know this until I did some research for the show, but he wrestled for the NWA World Heavyweight Championship against Story Funk Jr. on June 24th, 1970, which was coincidentally my 15th birthday while he was in the Georgia territory. He won a boatload, mostly tag team, but he won numerous titles around the country. Nikita, how did Joe Scarpa, how did he get involved in professional wrestling?
He just loved it. I'm going to say 99% of the people that get into it, and all the big names, they had a passion for it, without a doubt. Nikolai, I can tell you, without a doubt, Bruno, everybody, they loved it. There's a history to people when you go back in time, it's like they loved wrestling, so they wanted to get into it. And as far as Chief himself, now he got to the WWWF by Gorilla Monsoon. Apparently, the old man was looking for an Indian, and Monsoon was good friends, of course, from Jersey. Two Jersey boys got together and is like, do you want to do this? And it's like, yes. According to the Chief and Gorilla Monsoon, when he inducted Chief into the Hall of Fame in 1994, the very first Hall of Fame, he said, if I have to crawl on my belly like a snake, I'll do it, but I'll be there. Now, Chief told me his mother was a legitimate Cherokee Indian.
Oh, okay.
He does have the Italian heritage. There's no question of that. But, a lot of people want to say, oh, well, he was this. Well, like we've said it before, Ivan Koloff was a Canadian. When you talk to Ivan Koloff, you did not get the accent. You did not get any of that. Nikolai was not Russian. He was actually from Croatia. Now, his mother was Russian, but most of his background was Croatian. So it's like Bruno's legit, but there's not many that really are. But let me stop before I get too wild. You're in charge of the show. So if I start to get off, you give me the hook.
No, not at all.
When you talked about Johnny Valentine, he and Chief were a team as Strongbow and Johnny Valentine. So It's wild that the angle with Greg, and we'll talk about that later, but it's like there's a history there. And Greg does look like his father, and it's amazing.
Oh,
but
absolutely.
It's like this circle, it just keeps evolving and evolving. I can't talk about today. I don't know. God bless everybody that enters the ring and risks life and limb. But, I pretty much cut it off with 1984, and that's it. Then it was like, I'm involved. I see what's going on. I was watching Vince and the goofy Stone Cold. I call them cartoons. It was fun, but that's it for wrestling. When it was real, and a lot of people ask me, are you going to do like 1980 to 83? It's like, I don't know. Because that's when we say the day the music died was when Sheik beat Backlund. And then, of course, Hogan got him a little bit.
So Jay actually did have some legitimate Indian blood and in his background.
That's what he told me, without a doubt.
Wow. I learned something too, because I made a comment on Facebook and I was very quickly corrected about remember the commercial back in the day when somebody throws McDonald's out the window and there's the Native American on the side of the road with the tear. And I think his name is Iron Eyes Cody.
Absolutely correct.
But I heard that Iron Eyes Cody wasn't even a legitimate Native American.
Could be. I mean, look, it's entertainment. It's like Hollywood. It's like and I always say this too, like Strongbow, when he had the broken leg, which we'll talk about later, he should have got Academy Award that year. Any of those Hollywood goofs should have handed it to him. So many angles that were done over the years. And that's why I called the book When It Was Real, because we could believe, because they made it to it wasn't just an illusion, because they were getting their asses beat up. They tried to hold back so you could work again tomorrow night and the rest of the week and the rest of the month. But, what are you going to do when you take a body slam? You take a body slam. That's it.
Right.
Like Gorilla Monsoon used to say, when you get thrown out of the ring, there's two ways to land, lucky or unlucky. And that's it.
Good point. You reminded me of something about George Steele. And I heard this once that when he showed up for, was it Ed Wood? the movie, the director said, "Well, do you have any acting experience?" And I think Bill Murray said the man's been acting his whole life.
Yes,
And I'm
I've
sure
heard that as well.
yeah, I'm
Yes.
sure the role came a lot easier for him than than most.
Well, there's a
Because,
story to that. Actually, Batman, Adam West, was really good friends with Nikolai. I got to know him too through the years, but he recommended Nikolai for that. Nikolai gets the packet from Hollywood. He says, "This is George Steele." And then it got passed on that they contacted George Steele. And yeah, he looks like Tor Johnson. I mean, that could be his brother. No question.
wow, that's a great story. So, Nikita, I want to make a comment about what I just said. Joe Scarpa wrestles Dory Jr. for the NWA title on June 24th, and he shows up in New York like 2 weeks later as a Native American from Pawhuska, Oklahoma, and nobody's the wiser for it. Now today in 2025, if Stu Gatz wrestles for the Sheboygan Championship Wrestling and he shows up on WWE TV, I bet within an hour the internet's flooded with every single fact about Stu Gatz, including the name of his first cat. Right? I mean, it's hard to believe that, like in our lifetime, that society and wrestling has morphed into what it has.
Probably before he even reached the arena, it would be all over the internet, because that was a problem. Because I got kicked out of Vince McMahon's dressing room, not just but the whole area where everybody was on Shotgun Saturday night. We were in a bar in New York when Vince was in deep competition with WCW, when everybody was running away and all the mouths were running. So we're there. It's the first time I met Vince. He was good. He was nice. But then Arnold Skolin come over and he said, "Listen, Vince is edgy. He's been getting his pocket picked and stabbed in the back. He doesn't really know you. You can't be back here. Go to the bar, help yourself, whatever." Because that's the skit the night Nikolai did where he was living in a cardboard box in Times Square. Todd Pettengill was running the promo part of it. So it was fine. It's like, hey, I understand. No problem. That's the first night I met Tony Gurria too. Another funny story we'll get into later. But yeah, it's one of those things where you have to control, because even for a while, I think you have to turn in your telephones anymore when you get to the arena. It's like, we don't want anybody texting, talking, or anything else. It's like, why the hell would you do that anyway? Why would you want to screw over your own business? Because
Right.
that's exactly why. So somebody says, "Oh, well, so-and-so told me what's going to happen. Oh, let me write that down. Oh, that's so exciting." It's like, come on, that's so unprofessional. It's like, I'll tell you what, Hollywood, you better believe you do not bring a phone into a studio. You leave it at the gate. In fact, the security takes it. No cameras, no phones, nothing's allowed in, because there's so many protected properties, scripts and things like that. And then, because I can't remember exactly what it was, but somebody left a damn script on the table and then it disappeared and then reappeared somewhere else. And the poor bastard that wrote it, he didn't get a damn dime. And folks, we're in the business to make money. We're not greedy, but it's a job. And
it's not show friends, it's show business.
Amen to that, Brother Benny.
Right? So, Nikita, in every show that I do, I have that one question that I can't wait to ask. I call it the payoff. You remember the scene in Dirty Harry when he's pointing the gun at the guy and he says, "In all the confusion, I forgot to fire, if I fired 5 or 6 shots." And, the question you got to ask yourself is, do you feel lucky? Well, do you? And what I always remember is the guy on the other end of the gun. What does he say? He says, "I gots to know." So I gots to know, how did Joe Scarpa from Nutley, New Jersey, become Chief Jay Strongbow from Pawhuska, Oklahoma? Was this 100% Vince Sr.'s idea?
Yes. And that's why I say Monsoon contacted him and he said, "Do you want the job?" And it's like, he had a lot of the regalia, without a doubt. It's not like he ran off, like when I had to put all of this together, it pieced together through the years. Chief had all of that stuff. And it's wild that he fit right in. It's just like he was excitement. Bruno was Bruno. He was our champion, our strong man, our hero. But when you had Chief Jay Strongbow, how many people know if you said to somebody that was a fan of the 70s, Chief J, boom, they know who you're talking about. Or
Of
Chief,
course.
without a doubt.
Without
But Chief
hesitation.
J, it's like, man, that's Strongbow, without a doubt. And it was just a instant love affair with the fans.
Yeah, it didn't take too long. I mean, he was, over right away, right? Right in the main, not maybe main event, but upper main event, or
Yes, he was at the top of the card. Bruno had the main event. The only time, like Madison Square Garden, that Chief main evented was when he tag teamed with Bruno.
Or maybe when Bruno went to Japan, would he main event possibly?
Nope.
No?
Nope. Those were the only times he main evented. Oh, no. Bruno worked his schedule out. Believe me, the old man had that worked out, because it's like, this
you
block.
got to be in the Garden.
Well, so where did I hear it recently? It was like part of the it was actually a shoot interview with Bruno I saw, where the NWA and WWWF split because they couldn't agree on who was going to get Bruno the most and for their block of dates. And it was like, hey, this is big shit, because some people say, well, the Garden wasn't that big a deal. Bullshit. It's Black Friday every month at that time, because they had to draw. And I've said this before, we almost didn't get to witness Ken Patera, because the first time he wrestled in the Garden with Bruno was January 16th of 77. It wasn't a snowstorm, but it was like a gale storm, high winds, frigid temperatures. The friggin' Potomac was frozen over. I was driving to work, or when I was a bus taking over a bridge, the Hanover Street Bridge, and I'm looking out, and you could walk out. It was just frigid cold. So even the rails weren't running. So the old man came in and said, "Oh, that's it, Bruno. He's done." Because, they went 3. They were scheduled for 3. And Bruno said, no, it's not him. It's the damn weather. What can he do? So if you're not going to make the bean counters happy, you're gone. And that's why they love Chief. It's like, throw him in there. He's like, Chief against Lou Albano was an instant sellout, even though it was second on the card in the bigger arenas. Now, sure, he main evented Witchies and different places like that, but for the most part, the Spectrum, Madison Square Garden, Baltimore, Capitol Center, Boston, that would be the champion, would always carry the main event.
Right. So one of the great mysteries I have is Joe, or Chief J's, age. Wikipedia, WrestlingData.com, and I think even the WWE website have his year of birth as 1928, but I have seen 1931 in several places. And that, can you clear up that controversy?
Yes, and I'll correct you on another thing. His given name was Luke Joseph Scarpa. That is Joseph Scarpa's date of birth of 1928, not Chief. Chief came later. He's not the older brother. He has a younger brother, Cadillac Sal, who was Sal's just a wonderful guy. He was on one of the antique show for the cars. Because he has
Sal
so
was
many.
in the chat room. Sal was in the chat room a little bit
Who
ago.
is?
Sal Scarpa.
Yes.
I don't know if he's still there,
Junior.
but yeah.
Yeah, it may be Sal Jr. But
Okay.
yeah, but Chief was not the older brother. And he took the name Joe Scarpa in the South. But then it's like, because he hated to be called Joe. He really did not like that. Because he told me, he said in the early days, he would ride with Vince, and he was putting his bag in the car, and Vince was up the street, and he hollered, "Hey, Joe, Joe." And he said, I wasn't answering. He got up, and I said, "I'm Chief or Jay. I'm not Joe. Don't be saying that shit." And it's like, you got to live it. You've got to believe it. And if you don't, nobody else is going to. And Nikolai beat that into my head, as well as I was blessed to work with so many of the legends, and each one was just as nice as the other. Nobody was ever an ass or anything like that. And they could have been. They could have just said, "Hey, your problem, chump, you figure it out." But they were all gracious people. Yeah. But the story I took away from it was, if you don't believe it, those people are not going to believe it. So live it.
His real name is Luke Joe Scarpa?
Luke Joseph Scarpa, yes.
Okay. And then he was born, but he was born in 28 then.
No, he was not born in 28. No, that was the older brother Joe was born in 28. Yes.
Okay, so then they all have it wrong. So
They do.
There's a Joe Scarpa, and then there's a Luke Joe Scarpa. Luke Joe Scarpa is Chief J, and he's 31, 1931.
Yes. That's it.
Well, I mean, then maybe that Luigi, because the South Scarpa that's in the chat said Luigi and Jolton Joe were some. Did his brother wrestle at all?
Well, now I believe he may have been Jolton Joe Scarpa at one point. That could be true. See, with me, I'm more anything from the 70s on. What happened before that? Chief never really wanted to talk too much. He didn't want to. He gave me some things over the years from when he was Joe Scarpa in the South, and that's great. Part of his career, but he's always the Chief without a doubt.
Right, and even back then, I'm assuming he dressed the part, even like out, in his personal life.
Well, Nikolai used to tell me, because they pretty much came at the same time in 1970. And he said, Chief would sell it really. He'd go out and look, wow, like he just got off the reservation. And he's like, look at these buildings. Wow, look at this. And look at that skyscraper. And made you believe that, he's this humble Indian that probably had a horse last week. And now this week he's
right off the reservation. Now he's in the big city. Right.
Yeah. And he came across that way in the promos. Very humble, very reserved, and very sincere. And I think that's part of what got his excitement and color got him over. I mean, Chief would run to the ring, flip over the top rope, and be dancing in the ring with whoever he was against. But his interviews, he wasn't loud or crazy. He was sincere. And that sincerity came through and was like a volcano and like a thunderstorm.
I listened to a couple of his interviews in preparation for the show, and that was the one thing that did impress me, was how soft-spoken he was.
Yes.
Very, very humble, just answered the question and never raised his voice. I'm sure he raised it. I'm sure he got excited on a couple of occasions, but the ones I saw just, did the interview. The polar opposite of his persona in the ring, right?
Oh, yeah, because he was wild getting for the ring. I'll tell you, Larry the Axe Henning, Chief, told me this. He used to say, when I hear those bells, that's money, because that means it's the Chief, and you're going to be near the top if you're not on the top, whatever city you're in. And it was like, yeah, the bells. You would hear the bells coming, and it was like, here he is. And back in those days with no music, it would be the flashes going off. And you'd look in the distance, and then you'd see the headdress. And it was like, that was it. The world stopped. Here comes the Chief. Wow. That was just
how much money do you think he would have made if merchandise was a thing back in the 70s, like selling tomahawks and headdresses and, T-shirts? I mean, he would have been a gazillionaire, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Like they say, a couple of people like Superstar was 20 years too soon and things like that. That's it for all of those guys. If they would have had Saturday night's main event, or if they would have had this kind of cable exposure, yeah, they would be making $1 million a year. They did okay, but they were working almost every friggin' day. I mean, it wasn't too many days off.
No, we'll get. I have a couple of numbers later that we'll get into. But now, were there any other candidates for Jay's role? Because I always come back to Wahoo McDaniel, legitimate Native American, and he had the name recognition in New York because of his playing days on the Jets. We interviewed Karen McDaniel on Dan and Benny a couple of months ago, and she did mention that Wahoo was at one point. I guess he had Vince Sr.'s number in his briefcase, but her opinion was that that Wahoo would have been too difficult for Vince to manage. And actually, I heard something that Jim Cornette said that, I don't know if it's true or not, that Wahoo at one point slapped Phil Zacco in Baltimore. I don't know if there's any truth to that or not, but was there like a bunch of candidates and Jay was picked, or was
not that I know of? But I know Wahoo had been with them at one point in the 60s. He'd been with WWWF. He had appeared there. So maybe because Phil Zacco, I'll explain this for the folks that haven't heard me speak before. And this is in the book when it was real. I used to work for a bond company as a young man, and the bonds would come through, and part of my job as a clerk, I'd process everything. And one day, a Capital Wrestling Corporation bond came through for New York. And it was like, wow, I almost shit myself because I was like, oh, there it is, wrestling, And it was Vince Sr., Phil Zacco, Willie Gilsberg. These are all officers of the company. It was legitimate Capital Wrestling Corporation. It was a legitimate business out of Washington, D.C. But and then there was something with Superstar in 1977 when he was hurt, and they said he would have to post a appearance bond. So I'm looking through the bonds every day like a sucker Mark, thinking that maybe they did that, but I never saw that one, of course. But yeah, if you slap Phil Zacco, he was high up on the ladder. That wouldn't have been a good thing if it happened. Well, and he was a small guy too. Jeez, Phil Zacco, if anybody remembers, he didn't want to make too many appearances. But if you go back, and it's on YouTube, when Bruno sits down with Zbyszko to sign the contracts, Phil Zacco is on camera. Okay. And they did a whole big thing. And he's like, now I can rest now that I have his name on paper. And it was like, because you didn't see Phil Zacco that much. But he was a small guy. He was probably 5'5", no bullshit.
Yeah. In my, now 2025 fantasy booker mind, though, I see Wahoo coming to New York, tagging with Jay. Maybe they even win the titles. At some point, Wahoo turns on Jay. And I mean, to me, that would have been an epic feud. Now, Karen said that Wahoo did not like to wrestle heel. And that's maybe why it wouldn't have happened. But to me, that would have been a sellout anywhere.
Benny, I'll tell you what, in 1982, when Jules appeared with Jay. Now, I didn't see the way we were set up. We had Channel 20 would give us All-Star Wrestling at 11, and then Channel 45 would give us Championship Wrestling at 4. So they do the introduction, and here comes the Chief, and then there's a white set of feathers, and Wahoo was always white. I'm like, holy shit, he's got Wahoo. But it was like, oh man, I was disappointed. I really thought maybe because Frank Amato, Frank, right?
Yeah.
You know who he is.
Yeah.
I used to correspond with him, and he told me Strongbow's coming back. And I'm like, no shit. He said he should be there at the March 30th taping. So I had a little bit of a clue that he was on the way. And boy, that was just, for a couple of seconds, I was really happy if it would have been those two. I didn't care much for Jules. I really didn't.
Yeah, what was his? I mean, he was a legitimate Native American, wasn't he?
Yeah.
His real name was Frank Hill.
Frank Hill, yep. Nice guy. I mean, I got no heat with him, but it's like I didn't like that gimmick at all. But here's what happened. Bruno, when he retired the first time, and even Bruno said the rest of that shit, and then Bruno
after 81.
Yeah, after that, he said that. No, I don't even think about that. But October the 4th of 81, that was his farewell. Then he went to Japan. He started with Dominic something called the IWA, something to that, IWF, IWA. And they were trying to get Chief, Ivan Putski, and maybe a couple others. And then the old man got wind of that. It was like, oh, no. And then they brought Chief in, and, it was a little bit later in years for him, but that was Senior's idea, the Strongbow brothers. And it was like, okay, you're the boss. I'll do it. And
my favorite was, of course, Billy White Wolf.
Yeah. The Indians, without a doubt, they were, colorful. And yeah, people say, well, he was Iranian, and he was. He was a friend of Saddam Hussein. In fact, Saddam Hussein had bought him a house in the United States, and they say he sold it. And it's like, if he finds out, he's going to have me killed because he's a bastard, which he is. So It's like, I love them together. I don't give a shit who was what or what they really were when they were out there with those headdresses and doing their thing. Now, I did love Strongbow and Maivia as well, the two chiefs. That was great. And in my opinion, see, people have to realize WOR, Championship Wrestling, Channel 9 out of New York, that was an infomercial. for all of the cities, it was always an infomercial for all of us. But for New York, that's what it was geared towards, Madison Square Garden. That's why things would be strategically placed by the hour, since they were taped in 3-block increments, like when Maivia turned on Backlund. They put that on the second hour. Now, the night before, of course, we have no idea. I'm at the Capitol Center, and I'm watching the Chiefs against the Lumberjacks. That was the 9th, Monday. And then Tuesday, they're at Championship Wrestling in Philadelphia. So the second hour is when Maivia turns on Backlund, which was going to be shown the Saturday before the Monday card of October 23rd at the Garden. So here comes Strongbow down the aisle by himself. The Lumberjacks hit the ring. Strongbow comes by himself, then Maivia. And Chief played it perfect. He walked onto the other side. He wouldn't even look at Maivia. And to me, it was more that Maivia turned on Strongbow than he did on Backlund. I mean, all that bullshit about he helped Backlund when he was in high school and beat superstars. Like, who believes that shit? Come on, that's too stupid. But yeah, it was a nice angle. It was a nice run, but giving it a little bit more was Maivia turning on Strongbow, and that set him on fire.
Right. So one of my favorite words, because I'm a numbers guy, retired finance guy, is formulaic. But Vince Sr. operated the WWF in a very formulaic fashion. So I always use the Rocky Fitzpatrick, Bob Orton Sr. brings him in as Rocky Fitzpatrick. Wrestles the matches against Chuck Richards, and I'm trying to think who the enhancement guys were back in the day. Lee Wong, maybe a couple of those guys. Next thing you know, he's at the Garden wrestling Bruno. I think Jay inherited the number 2 role from, was it Victor Rivera or was it DiNucci?
Well, mostly Victor, because Dominic pretty much disappeared for a while.
He was in and out, but Rivera was more of a constant. But so explain to everybody what the role of the number 2 babyface in the 70s, what they were there for.
All right, let me back up a little. What Benny's trying to tell you with formula was that the heel would come in. This is when everybody got along and they would trade talent. You had a couple of mainstays, of course, your champion, or a Strongbow who would fill the arena and people would come in to see him, and a couple other faces, like a Tony Gurria, people like that. But the heels usually would make their way throughout the air because Bruno or Backlund or Pedro were champion for a long time, with the exception of Superstar. So here comes, let's just take, for example, Greg Valentine. He started his initial run, forget about those couple appearances at the Garden in 75. When he came December the 12th of 78, did a couple of TVs, did a couple of more TVs, then he would hit the arena in February. You got exposure without television. That's why promoters try to make it. If you don't have TV, let's go back again. The IWA in 1975, where Mil Mascaras was champion.
Yes.
They had Ivan Koloff running out of Roosevelt's Arena Stadium.
Midnight on Channel 9, right on Saturday night.
That's it. Then they got squeezed out of television. So that was a problem. And it was like, how the hell do people know where you're going to be and what's happening? You're not going to make it. It's just, you may have all the talent in the world, but if you don't have that television, Daddy, you're finished.
Well, yeah, you don't have the storylines, right?
So, right. So that's what they would do. You get the TV exposure. For somebody that was weak, they would do like an angle where they would attack Backlund or attack Bruno. Now, Spiros Arion did not need that, and we'll save that for another show. But still, when it hit and it got to the airway, I'll say, let's go back to the Chief. And we're going to talk about the broken leg angle. But even though that happened Valentine's Day on 1979, he still wrestled in some of the smaller arenas, not anywhere in Philadelphia, because you never know who's going to show up.
Right.
That these people circulate, us, the fans. You never know where they're going to show back up. But he did pick up a couple of paydays before he had to go into hibernation. He missed the Garden, of course, because that was the cover shot That's Backlund against Valentine, February 19th, 1979. That was a President's Day snowstorm. The East Coast was just dumped on. It was horrible. So they went an hour, but they were going to do an hour no matter what. It wasn't because they had to fill the card, because mostly except Bruno. Bruno did not make it that night. He was snowed in Pittsburgh. So it happens. I mean, what the hell are you going to do? Airline shuts down. You're screwed, man. That's it. So you would run your heels for like almost 3 months, and then they hit the arenas. And then, they would fluctuate throughout, and then you get a new group that came in. And of course, you would give them either Albano, Blassie, or the Wizard. And they would lead them, and it's like they're already hated. So that helps establish you linking yourself with these other hated bastards. So now you're another hated bastard.
Now, but Jay was Jay I don't remember Jay putting like these heels over though, was he?
No.
Before Bruno?
No. I'll tell you what though, there were a few. Pampero Firpo was the first. Strongbow had not lost in Madison Square Garden, and they were getting ready to have Firpo go with Morales.
72 was that?
72.
Okay.
The Argentinian, the Wild Bull of the Pampas.
Pampas, yeah. Oh, yeah.
A count out. They took a count out loss. And he did it for Waldo Von Erich also. Von Erich was going to wrestle Bruno the next month. This was Bruno was going to wrestle Arion. This goes back to April 14th of 75 to finish off their 3-series run. So, because I asked the chief about it, I said, man, it died 1,000 deaths. That was like a 39-second match. And he said, I know. I really like Walter. And they said, we want to get him over big. So I said, here's how we'll do it. And it was perfect because Chief hadn't even taken off the headdress. They get in each other's face a little. He turns around and Von Erich nails him and throws him out of the ring. So then Chief takes a big bump, hits the floor, and it's like he can't move. Bruno comes out, and they literally bodily pick Chief up with a couple of guards and carry him back to the dressing room. Well, there was almost a effing riot. It was nasty. And the only thing that stopped it were they brought the midgets out right away. And then people start laughing and hee ha ha. But people were mad because they kept ringing when they rang the bell, that meant get back to your seat. Of course, at the start and the match. But if they kept ringing the bell in between, it's like, go back to your seat. People were pissed. They wanted Von Erich's ass at that point. And they felt cheated too. It's like, son of a bitch. I expected a war, but in wrestling, the next show, this show sets up the next show, which sets up the next show, and on and on. Just like Bob Backlund used to say, there's holds and counter holds. There's a chain, and same thing in wrestling. It just went on and on and on. But you know what? We loved it.
Oh yeah. No, I remember watching it. I don't even know what year it was. I have this match in my head. It was Strongbow against Patera, and I'm thinking like, there's no way that Strongbow can even compete in this match. And I think it was a Broadway. I think
on television.
Huh?
Was it on television?
I think it was, back in the day, they used to show HBO from Madison Square Garden.
Oh, all right. Well, that would have been Superstar's first appearance as champion. That was May 16th of 77 because Chief had a bloody nose. He actually got his nose broken. They went 20 minutes. It ended with Chief had the sleeper on Patera and the bell ring. So everybody's excited, but it's like, no. Time limit expired. And I'll tell you this, because the television match that would happen on the 24th, first hour, Chief against Patera. All right, now the taping previously, Vince is doing an interview. He says, all right, Mr. Patera, you've been challenged by Chief J. Strongbow. Do you accept? Yeah, I'll meet him next week. I'll take that squaw, man. No problem. So here they come. They do their TV match. Of course, Albano gets involved. Then they're starting to get the better of the Chief. Here comes White Wolf. He's got the tag belt. Busts Patera open. Cuts him, right? So the second hour, Patera challenges White Wolf. In the third hour, that's when we get to the broken neck angle with Billy White Wolf. From that point on, it was just like a whole year of Chief versus Patera. And it's funny because one time I went to a flea market with Chief one time. We're walking around and he says, Nikita, what was your favorite angle that I did? I said, I know you want me to say Valentine because that was your idea, but Patera. And number 2 was Arion. Valentine is third. He's like,
wow.
Are you kidding? I said, Chief, that thing with Patera ran for a year. And you guys could pick it up today and people would fill in a ring. It just would never end. It was always excitement. And of course, with Arion, we wanted his ass too. But, and I said, and I love Valentine. That was great. That was well done. But in my book, that comes in third. It just does it. Patera against Chief was just for the ages, without a doubt.
It's amazing how back then those feuds could carry on for so long. That would never happen today.
No, and I'll tell you, it's like I on my Facebook page, and that's the best place people can contact me. I post something usually for this day in wrestling. Now, back for 1983, I posted it was for because February the 12th of 83, that was another damn blizzard. So a couple of days later on the 16th, the guys had to get to Allentown because they had moved from Philadelphia to Allentown because they had to set up the angles for the upcoming summer. And that was John Studd with the body slam with Andre and Rocky Johnson challenging Morocco. And that all took place that night. You got to get that out there because if not, believe it or not, they had planned all of this out months and months in advance. And that's why when Bruno got the broken neck, it was like, holy shit, now what do we do? And right. Superstar was out of commission for a good 5 weeks. He injured, I heard his elbow. I think he said maybe it was his knee, but in any event, he was out of commission. Then he got that staph infection and almost died. And it was like, holy shit, what do we do now? Because our good friend Davey O filled in up in upstate New York one night for Superstar. We had Waldo Von Erich brought into Baltimore, and it was like they didn't tell you. There wasn't anybody outside as you walked in the building and told you Superstar Billy Graham cannot be here. They waited until everybody's ass was in the seat. Sure. Then they made the announcement before the show started, and it was like, people aren't going to leave. If anybody did leave, it was maybe 5%. And when they announced Waldo Von Erich, that was it. People were happy. It was Putski. Putski was the challenger. And it was like, okay, we're here. We're not going anywhere. But, if it's planned out, so if something goes wrong, and that's why most of the champions, and I think Superstar said he had to put up a deposit of magnitude, I think about $30,000, and back then it's no chump change today, but back then,
oh yeah,
it's like, because if you think you're going to go in the business for yourself, we're going to stick it up your ass and we're going to keep the money.
Oh yeah, definitely. So Chief gets 4 runs with the title, tag team titles. I want you to explain Sonny King, but you had Sonny King, Billy White Wolf, and then 2 with Jules. Now, was the tag team thing done to keep him in a high profile, or was maybe more of a concession to his age that he didn't have to do as much work, or did he prefer tag team?
No, because Chief, he's likened to like a Jimmy Snuka. Didn't need a belt. Okay, this guy's going to draw no matter what. So throw him a tag belt, make the fans happy because he's a champion now, and that's all you needed to do. And it had every. All right, I'm talking as a fan. What I liked, what I saw. Yeah, that was great. Chief is a tag team champion. That's beautiful. We were very happy. That satisfied us because especially if you're going to have Pedro, first Bruno, Pedro, then Bruno and Backlund. I mean, Chief's not going to turn heel. That would be suicide for the company. They'd never do anything that stupid. So it's like, okay, so he's going to be number 2 guy, like you mentioned, and that's true. And his role was not always to put people over, because that gets confusing sometimes. People will say, oh, well, you have to get through the Chief to get to the Bruno. It's like, no, because you didn't want to kill Chief. It's like Lou Albano. Somebody was reading about, it was a result where Bruno wrestled Lou Albano. And they said, oh, he didn't pin him? It's like, you never pinned Lou Albano, and you never made him submit. He'd bleed like a shotgun wound and run away like a punk. But that was the catch. he came back another time so somebody could murder him then, but you never just ended it. It's like, yeah. I mean, there were times where Lou Albano, and if you just put him against Chief, Bruno, Pedro, whoever, everybody else can have the night off. You'll sell the building out. That was it.
Right. That's amazing. Now, but why Sonny King? Like, what was that to elevate Sonny King?
A little, he was popular, and it was like, all right, this is a good combination. They didn't get along that well, though. It really, that's why they had a short reign.
I'd say that was pretty short-lived, right?
Yep. June 26th, they're turning the belts over to Tanaka and Fuji. So It was kind of maybe a transition anyway. But see, like with Fuji, Bruno said he brought Tanaka to Vince Sr. without a doubt. You take a look at the man, it's like, holy shit, without a doubt. And then Tanaka helped bring Fuji in, and it's like, this is just gold. Put these two together and let them run. Right. So Chief wasn't happy with Sonny King because the old man was a little bit dismayed by it. And Chief said, I tell you what, you book him and North Attleboro, don't put me on the card. And then the next month, you book me on top and don't put him on the card. And you see. And it was like, you're right. This is okay. We'll end this. It's done. No problem.
And he was pretty much gone after that, wasn't he? Sonny King?
Yeah, he was. Yeah, they teamed him with Bobo in Baltimore a couple of times. I like Sonny King. I mean, look, who knows who's going to get along and who's not. There's a lot that goes on behind the scenes.
Sure.
Like Nikolai, there were people that didn't like him, if you can believe that. And you can't find a nicer guy.
Yeah. That is hard to believe. So, the very first babyface to heel switch I saw involved Strongbow. It was Jimmy Valiant. I think it was 1971.
Yes.
And I think he was Gentleman Jimmy Valiant. And I don't remember who it was that they were wrestling against, but that was like my absolute horror when Jimmy turned on Jay. And 50 years later, I meet Jimmy at his wrestling camp. The very first thing I said to him was that, I really hated you because you turned on Strongbow. And he laughed. But then you got Arion, and then you had Maivia, like you said. I probably can answer my own question, but why was it always Strongbow that they turned on?
Because he was so popular. You turn on the Chief, you got instant heat, and you'll sell out buildings. Now, Jimmy Valiant was wrestling. He and Chief were wrestling against Beautiful Bobby and Tony and the Black Demon, who was Tony Nero at the time. Because when Jimmy refused to tag, he went over to Beautiful Bobby's corner, who the Wizard was managing at the time. And then it was like he took over with them. And then because the thing was, they said, well, the Chief was teaching him the sleeper, Jimmy Valiant. And then once Jimmy learned the secrets of the sleeper, then he just decided he was a monster all along. He was just using Strongbow. So it was like, that's cool. We ate it up. We believed it.
Oh, yeah.
But it wasn't like a lot of wars. It wasn't like a Batera or Valentine or Eric. It kind of fizzled out quick because I don't think Jimmy was long for the company. He was moving along.
Right.
Now, a long story with the Valiant brothers. He would come back later with Johnny. And I know all the stories about that. We'll get into it another time. But then it was like, that was gold. But even Jimmy got a belly full of that, not in any kind of heat or bad situation, but he wanted to do his own thing, and he did it.
Okay. So we finally come to the 1979 feud with Valentine. Chief's gone for about 4 months maybe, and only to come back. And, I mean, he really feuded with Greg. It seemed like the rest of 79. What the broken leg was just a way to write him off TV, or was it legit?
No, but that's why I said he should have got the Academy Award. Here's the setup for it. It was Hamburg Fieldhouse. And the reason they didn't do it the night before in Allentown, because the Chief was there, they wrestled in the 6-man, because the Hamburg Fieldhouse was owned by a volunteer fire department that operated out of there as well. So it's like, that's perfect. Have him break my leg, put me out on the side of the ring, have the ambo come in, and then I'll go off in the ambo to the hospital. Drop me off around the corner, and we'll take care of it. Well, Phil Zacco, this was the year of the snowstorm. This was 14th because it was Valentine's Day. It wasn't snowing yet, but it was like 20 degrees outside. And Phil Zacco said, I'm not opening that friggin' door, the big overhang door that they had where the ambo would come in and out. So Chief said, if you don't do it, you're going to go do it right. I'm not doing the angle. So they get to the old man. Of course, the old man says, you do what he says. Just follow him. Let him do it how he tells you. So they did. The problem was the ambo was out on a run. It was like, where the hell are they? Son of a bitch. You know, they brought up the great Hussein at the time, Sheik against Tony Russo, that match. Then the 6-man, and it's like it's going on, and it's like, holy shit, we might go off the air before the ambo gets here. But then they showed up, and man, they played it perfectly. Well, there was the ringside doctor, Dr. Wood. I don't think he was smart. He didn't know what the hell was going on. Because if you look at somebody's face, I'm a retired detective sergeant, I can usually see things pretty good. That guy was believing it. Because Chief said, I told Monsoon, go break up the steps and make a splint. Well, he didn't break up the steps, but he did get some wood. And this Dr. Wood, he was just really, intent looking at it. Because when the ambo crew showed up and he showed, do this, do that, I want you to do that. So they take him off in an ambo. Then it gets worse. Now, all of a sudden, people are leaving the arena. They're going to follow the ambo.
Oh, geez.
Like, son of a bitch. Now what? It's like, go to Reading Hospital. Let's go. And somebody else said that it was planned that way to take photos, but it's like, that's not what Chief told me. It's like, no. Why the hell would they go to the hospital? They probably had to fake that one because they probably say, get the hell out of here. You ain't bringing that guy in here and do that shit. This ain't Hollywood.
So then, like, in his personal life, does he have to kayfabe it and walk around with crutches? And
not in Georgia, because not in 1979.
Right,
nobody knew. And that's why I say he was at a couple of arenas for another week before, because our TV, that was the third hour that was taped. And then it didn't really hit the television markets till like around March 4th. So it's like, okay, you got a couple of weeks, just stay out of Pennsylvania. You can't go to the Garden, things like that. And then, okay, that was it. Because it was in its infancy. The internet wasn't there yet. And wrestling was definitely protected. And you could keep things quiet. You didn't even know what the hell, like I've said before, if you had a friend that was, let's say, in Boston, and you wanted to know what happened the night before, long distance call was expensive. Your parents are going to beat the shit out of you over something like that.
Yeah.
Or like the Garden, So the sheets weren't even around yet. The sheets wouldn't come around till like around late 1981, mid to late
early 80s. Yeah.
You didn't know what the hell was going on. And by the time you found out, it was too late. The only thing we had were the magazines. And thank God for the photos. My favorite was George Napolitano. I'm not a big Bill Apter fan. I'm more with George Napolitano because George was everywhere. George would go to TV. He would go to Baltimore. He's the one that got the shots of Superstar's victory over Bruno. And Superstar liked George too, and he told him, of course he traveled. And I used to see George a couple of times when I was doing security with the police department, and he was with WCW. I said, hey, George. He's like, what the hell are you doing dressed up like that? I said, this is my job, man. That's it. My other job. So
right.
It was cool.
What happened to Jay in 80 and 81? It seems like he took off most of the second half of 80 and the first half of 81. And then I saw that he wrestled for Georgia and even did some time in Mid-Atlantic. Did he just take some time off?
No, he was in Georgia and he had a hot feud with Ernie Ladd. And with Ernie Ladd, it was almost like a broken arm because he was wearing a cast, but not quite broken because he was able to come back in a little bit faster time than a natural broken arm would heal. So yeah, he had it because Ladd did the same thing Arian did. Got a hold of the Chief, locked him in the ropes, rep the headdress, put the feathers in his mouth. So they had a hell of a feud going in Georgia because Tony Atlas and Iron Mike Sharp, hit the ring. I got a Georgia Championship Wrestling to make the save on the Chief.
Oh, was Mike Sharp a babyface?
He was down there at that time, yeah.
I wish people knew about his history. Everybody, they think of him and they think of, when they called him a wimp and he was losing to everybody. But before that, he had a very good track record before he hit the WWF.
Without a doubt, especially in Canada. And nobody trained harder. Even Bob Backlund, it would be like a toss-up. And Sheik, because Sheik was very dedicated. So it's
did very well in Mid-South. I think he beat Killer Khan for one of their titles.
Yes. So, and Mike stayed around for even on the indies. He had his own little promotion and school in Brick, New Jersey. Yeah, B-R-I-C-K, Brick, New Jersey, because Nikolai and I used to go up there for him all the time. And he was just a great, easygoing guy. Forget about all the other stories, because technically, like somebody said, he was like a OCD condition. He just he got lost in things, and he couldn't stop. I have a little bit of that, and I've used it to my advantage, but he was a little bit obsessed with things, and it's like, okay, don't laugh at him. Just, try to help the poor guy. He's doing the best he can. And in the ring, he could go an hour if you needed it. Oh, yeah. He was good size, but he had the stamina.
Good worker, too.
Absolutely. He could work the crowd. I'll tell you what, he and Chief had a hell of a match at the Garden in 83. It was May 16th. Backlund was wrestling Slaughter in the main event, and those two put on a hell of a match.
Yeah, I can only imagine.
And it was great because Chief had Sharp locked in the ropes and started taking the armband off. The place went electric. It was unbelievable.
So, Jay, and this is a number that astounds me. And again, this is according to WrestlingData.com, but if anything, I think it would be more. He wrestled 263 times in 1983. So, given the birth year of 31, he would have been 52, right? And he's still, still winning the majority of his matches. Yes. What made him keep wrestling full time when, most guys his age are long retired?
He loved it. It was his job. He had a place to work. He was putting a lot of guys over in 84. 83, right. He and Jules didn't lose the belts until March 9th. And then, that was pretty much it. Jules was going by May, and then Chief was on his own. And it started then to put guys over for Backlund. His last opponent in Madison Square Garden was Nikolai, September 22nd of 84. And that was Nikolai's return to the Garden when Vince was getting ready for the big takeover, because Nikolai told me Vince called. Nikolai was in Florida, and he said, come home, and we need you here, and see who you can bring. Don Jardine, the spoiler, was the only one that came with him. Everybody else was a little bit like, they weren't quite sure what was happening yet, so they didn't want to push it. So, the Chief's last match in the Garden was against Nikolai, and he said he couldn't have been happier to put him over because they were very, very good friends.
I want to give a reference to the current product. So Gunther, who I absolutely love, and I think he could have wrestled anywhere in any territory at any time. But in 2024, Gunther wrestled 68 matches. And, here you have Jay Strongbow in his early 50s wrestling at least 263 times. Just amazing when you think about it.
Yes. And then, you didn't do any plane traveling then, unless you wanted to save yourself wear and tear in the car and you buy yourself a plane ticket. But mostly it was by the car. Everything was done in a vehicle, and it was tough.
So now in 84, it looked like he tapered off a little bit. And he was, his one loss record, and I know you really can't pay much attention to that, but if you look in he had a very good winning percentage. And now that last year he lost more than he won, but other than even the year before, he won the majority of his matches. So was 84 more of a function of Vince Jr. taking over?
Yes, absolutely. His father died in 83. So It was like May of 83. So Vince was in charge at the time. One of the first cards that Vince promoted was that May 16th, Backlund against Slaughter at Madison Square Garden. And because you could see Vince in the hallway, he's watching. He had his coat off, and you could tell he just in the vest, and he was really paying attention. He loved it. He's probably a bigger fan than you and I, Benny, because a lot of times you watch, you could see Vince, because he would do the color at the Garden. He'd take the headphones off, and he's just listening and loving it. And it's like, wow, this is great.
Got to be a fan first.
But, that one-loss record is important. It meant a lot to us. Nothing better than getting those magazines and looking at the standings every month, the rankings, and it was like, wow, who's number one? Who's number one champion? So it was stupid. They should have just said champion and then go 1 to 10. But that was great. Almost as good as the pen pals, Benny.
I love that. That was an experience. It's hard to believe. And, I have half a mind to go back in that magazine and randomly send like 5 or 6 letters to people. Now, probably half of them, maybe even more than that, are dead by now. But, it was amazing that you could actually get somebody's address, your home address. And, and it's the funny thing is, up until about 5 years ago, if you had sent a letter to that address, my sister would have gotten it, but I still would have received it. But yeah, just a different time. So now after that, Jay becomes an agent and does that for a number of years. As beloved as he was in the ring, it seems like he was a polarizing figure. It seems backstage that some of the guys loved him and some of the guys didn't like him that much.
Depends who you talk to. Now, what you got to remember is, for the people out there that don't know what an agent is, you're like the foreman on a job. You're the supervisor. You got to make sure all these guys get there. You're represent, because Vince Jr. couldn't be all over the place. He didn't have time. He was doing other things. So the agent's running the card. You got the finishes, you got the pay. Sometimes you got the payoffs, and you got to make sure everybody's there. And they're there on time, and they're not creating a riot and causing shit. So naturally, the boss is not popular. But I've heard the stories. And now I'm going to respond like this. Here's the people that I would give you as a list to go to and say, ask this person if the chief was a good agent or if he was an asshole like these other bastards say he was. Nikolai, number one. Never had a problem with him. Tony Garea, another one. Greg Valentine has said it openly. He said, I never had any problem with Chief as an agent. And Greg is Mr. Constipation. He's no friendly, slap you on the back kind of guy.
He's New York personified.
Yes. But Tara never badmouthed him. And I'll tell you who above all, Haku. The one and only Haku, because Chief told me the story. I won't mention the other legend's name who was giving him a big raft of shit in the dressing room. And Haku jumped up and said, you don't talk to Chief like that. And the guy backed down, naturally. He saved his own life. Yep, he saved his own life. So years later, we were doing a show in Indianapolis. So Chief told me he said, give him my number. And tell him to call me. He forgot. So he called him the Tank. So I walked up and I said, hey, Tank. Now, I'd never met Haku before this. He turns around and looks at me. I said, your father has a message for you. Here, he wants you to call him. And he got a big smile. He said, Chief. I said, you better believe it.
That's respect. And everybody that you spoke, the names that you just mentioned are like all legends and all have like phenomenal reputations in the business.
Yes. And Kamala, because he was a pig farmer. No, that was his thing. Because Chief, I told him I was going to see him. He said, tell him I said hi to the pig farmer. So I'll go over and said, hey, Jim, I got a message for you. Somebody said, say hi to the pig farmer. Another big smile. You talk about Chief. And he was just happy. It's like, there you go.
Wow. Yeah, it seems like the ones who had the problem with it were the younger guys.
Or like Nikolai told me, they were sitting around a table with Vince, and somebody, I'm not going to mention names, somebody said, Vince, we need more money, front money, because they would get paid at the end of the month. And then it was like, you need to live throughout the rest of the month. And he said, it's not enough to live off of. So Vince turned to Nikolai and he said, Nikolai, do you have enough money every month? Yeah, Vince, I have plenty. You know, I send money home. And they said, you bastard, because you was so damn cheap. That's why. Nikolai said they want dope money. That's what it was. See, they worried about. And Iron Sheik was another one that never badmouthed Chief. In fact, before I met Chief, we were up in Detroit. We did an autograph thing for a weekend. The last good weekend of my life. When I got home, I found out about the prostate cancer. So I was talking to Sheik. I said, Sheik, I'll come visit you. You take me over to see Chief, because Chief was in Griffin, Georgia. Sheik was in Fayetteville, Georgia, which is like 30 miles away. He said, no, I cannot see Chief anymore. He no respect me. He say, why you do that shit? You Olympic athlete. You go be one of the boys. You should not do that. He's right. I shouldn't do it. I can't stop. And it's like, good luck, Sheik. God bless you. I hope you can do it. But even he didn't badmouth him.
Well, I'm just this is just coming to mind. I thought when Bruno made the comeback, the one that he doesn't want to talk about, in '85, that the only person that he would ride with was Strongbow, wasn't it?
I just heard that the other day, right? Because he said, I got roped into it because of the son. I said, I really didn't want any part of it, but he said they put me on a tour. Arizona, a bunch of places. And he said, Vince, I'm not getting in a car with these guys. If they get pulled over and they got dope in the car, it's my reputation. It's me that's going to have trouble. So Vince said, I'll put you with Strongbow. He's an agent. He said, okay, good. I know he's an old timer like me. He don't do that shit. So sure. And they were happy together. No problem.
Yeah. Yeah. So let me see if I can find this picture here. Let's see.
There he is.
There we go. So yeah, obviously you were very close to the Chief in his later years. How did now it looks like he lived the gimmick after wrestling too, right?
Yes. Now that's at his brother Sal, Cadillac Sal's house.
Okay.
We had gone the day before. This was supposed to not an audition, but Nikolai and I were up in Jersey City, and one of the producers of The Wrestler was there, and because they didn't know what the hell, because I actually was part of the group that met with Darren Aronofsky to help explain what's going on. So we brought one of the other, Scott Franklin, to that show. And then the next day I said, well, Nikolai, we're this close. We're going to go to Sal's and see Chief. He's visiting. So we go there. And so they had a great reunion. But then Nikolai said, listen, I want you to meet this East Ayurvedic Indian medicine doctor. You have to come back to Baltimore, though. So he said he'll cure anything. That's why Nikolai lost all the weight over the years. He wouldn't eat fish even, and no chicken, steak, nothing anymore, no meats. It's like, oh, yeah. Wow. So they all come down, and, we went to see this doctor, and he was a good guy. I mean, I don't know. Medicine is medicine. What works for me won't work for you. So, good luck with it. But it was a very fun, nice reunion, because there's another picture we had. It was the year before when I first got there myself with Andre the Giant sweater. I think, it was that day as well. And it's like, my God, Nikolai held it on one end and I held it on the other end, and Chief was in the middle. And it was like, he was a giant. There's pictures of him with Wilt Chamberlain and other guys that were 7 foot. So it's like, he wasn't 7'4", but he was a legitimate giant. No bullshit about that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. He was definitely larger than life.
Yes.
Now, what did Jay want his legacy to be? How did he want to be remembered by his fans?
That he had the sincerity, and that he really, because me as an abused child, severely physical and emotionally abused, I said, Chief, we would look at television and you were speaking to me when you said, I need somebody, I need my fans to come help me when I wrestle Arion. You spoke to us. And then there was a night that he was wrestling Tanaka, and I had a shirt. It was an orange shirt. My parents weren't all bad. I grade them D-, but they did buy me a shirt, and it had a picture of an Indian chief on it and a lettering of Chief on it. So I'm standing there, I'm waiting. Like I told you before, you see the flashes, and you see the headdress coming. Well, Tanaka had gone by first, and it was like, holy shit. My God, I would run if that bastard looked in my direction. So here comes the Chief, and I got my hand stretched out. Next thing I know, it's black. Boom. I get hit from behind, and I go down. It was a security guard. He nailed me hard. Well, the Chief stopped. He looked at the guy like, you asshole. He reached over, picked me up, and shook my hand. I'm like, holy shit. That's it. If I didn't already love him, that I was way over the top. So it gets better. The match ends. He's got the sleeper on Tanaka. Tanaka throws the salt. I said, that's it. I got to save the Chief. He's blinded. I go running down there. Well, good thing that they had to get Tanaka. Then the Chief staggering around. And so they don't know which end he's going to come out. I was on the end, the side he came out on. I'm trying to help hold him up and brush the salt. Then here come the guards again. But it's like, I don't give a shit. I'm there to save. Even if Tanaka breaks me in 6 pieces, maybe I'll hold him off so Chief can get away. We were crazy. We believed and we loved it. It meant everything to us.
I wish I could feel the emotion. But my first show was April 1968, Island Garden, West Hempstead. And it was Bruno versus Tanaka in the main event. And when they collided mid-ring, I mean, I could still in my mind, the sound it made. And even like it vibrated, the whole arena seemed to vibrate. And of course, Bruno got up at the count of like 9 and 99 100ths. But like, the emotion you felt in those 10 seconds.
Yes.
Was be there unbelievable. Live, I mean, my heart was in my throat.
Just they would shut down the house lights and just turn on the ring lights. The color was amazing. And it was like a thunderstorm. When the slams would occur, it vibrated throughout the building. And if you saw blood, and I've said this before, people probably think we were demented, sadistic bastards. But when you saw blood, it was a frenzy. If you did it to Chief or Bruno or any of the other guys that were loved, you better run for your life to get out of that building alive. But when they got the revenge and they drew the blood, it was orgasmic. And that's a true description. Orgasmic. We were beyond coming out of our skins.
Well, I mean, when I was young and the very first time I saw wrestling magazines on a newsstand, I mean, the covers look like crime scenes.
Yes. Especially if you've wrestled the original Sheik, Ed Farhat. It's like, oh my God, that was unbelievable. But yet, like King Curtis, you see his head.
Like a roadman, right?
Yeah, my God, he was just crazy.
Abdullah was the same way. And
Abdullah, sure, without a doubt. Chief did his fair share too, because it put over the heel and bring everybody back to see you get your revenge. So without a doubt, you had to do the blade.
Just an amazing career, though. I mean, he had a whole life before Chief J Strongbow, and he was pretty damn good. I mean, wrestling Dory Funk for the title, yes. Winning the Florida title, which was very prestigious back in the 60s, and against a guy named Valentine, Johnny Valentine. That's major league stuff.
Well, I've seen in written where people said when a lot of careers were finishing, Chief was just starting. It was like Jay Strongbow has just been born. Here he comes, and it's like, yeah. And he went, if you watch, like the book is centered on the 70s. Of course, he hits the WWWF in 1970, 71. He's got Jimmy. 72, he and Sonny King, they won the belts for the first tag team championship for the Chief. But with Lou Albano, it just began in the beginning in 1970. Tarzan Tyler and Crazy Lou come in. Chief got Wrestler of the Year with Lou Albano, and they think they're going to congratulate him. And then there's the blood on television. They hit him with the trophy, cut him open. And then it was wild because he started chasing throughout their matches when they would be on TV. The Chief would come out with a tomahawk and to be chasing Crazy Luke and Tarzan Tyler all over the place. So then 73 was Strongbow's year. That was it. He was just so over. It was unbelievable. And then 74 was when he and Bruno first started to team up, and especially in New York. And then, 75 with Arion. And then when Billy White Wolf came, White Wolf was there for first. He came in, and he had been around for a while too in the Worldwide Wrestling Federation prior to 76. Then Strongbow appears to save White Wolf, and then bang, they're a team. And then when Superstar won the belt, I got nothing against Superstar. That whole big thing against Backlund Superstar thing is like, look, Superstar was selling out the buildings because we wanted to see him beat. Chief wasn't getting title matches. Tony Gurria wasn't. Ivan Putski wasn't. Now you got people going against Superstar to see him beat. That's why you had the houses that were setting records when Bruno wrestled him, because they didn't want to see Superstar beat Bruno. They wanted to see Bruno beat Superstar.
Of course.
It was wonderful. It was just great. That's why I say my favorite year was 1977, because I was lucky enough. The Chief wrestled Superstar in Baltimore on August 27th, and the program says Strongbow gets long-awaited title match. And it's like, no shit. Yeah, Daddy, that is right. We waited long enough for this. Of course, he didn't come out on top, but then December the 5th at the Capitol Center, he and Maivia win the Battle Royal. They do a coin toss, Chief wins, and then he wrestled Superstar again. So it was like, man, I got to see him wrestle Superstar twice that year. I was happy.
Yeah. It's almost two, separate and distinct careers. Both of them were great.
Yes, without a doubt.
And you can't say that about too many guys in his profession.
No, and again, if you just say Chief, people know or Chief J, people know who you're talking about, without a doubt.
Right.
It meant that much to people.
Oh, yeah. I have to this day, I have fond memories of watching him in the ring. I remember, I was a 15-year-old kid. I first saw him and I was transfixed. It's like, who is this guy? He's great.
And he didn't just have one headdress. He had a multitude of different colors and different styles. The vest, the moccasin, everything. And the bells, like I said about Larry Hennig, it's like, man, that was it. That's all you needed. And but he could deliver. It wasn't just like all fluff where he came out dressed and then it was a shit match. It was excitement galore. You could put Chief in there with anybody, and I don't want to make light of like Johnny Rods, Baron Ciclune. That was their job. But when they got in there, like there was a show January 27th of 79. It wasn't a big main event. It was a lousy tag match. It was supposed to be Andre and Bravo. Bravo left. So I think it ended. It was Andre and Putski. Arion left. Koloff took his place, which was great. And then Stasiak. And it's like, But Chief was wrestling Cicluna as the second match. And it's like, okay. But it was a great night. And it was a great match. Chief and Cicluna. And they loved each other, too. They were very good friends. Of course, the Baron, as like son of a bitch, you couldn't beat him. He was, you could beat it, but it was like he delivered for the fans. You loved watching him.
You talk about a mainstay in the WWF.
Yes.
And then another guy who, unfortunately, the people who don't really know their wrestling history, they'll call him a jobber. What they don't realize is when he came to the WWWF, I think it was in 1966, he wrestled Bruno at the Garden.
Yes. Bruno said it on they gave the Baron a little plug in the TV taping, that December the 12th taping of 78. They put him in there with a guy named Fred Marzino, and Baron, he looked up after the match like, what the hell was this shit? But it was like Bruno said it. He's, you look at him, he almost looks lean. He said, but that was always Baron Cicluna. He said, even when I wrestled him in main events in the 60s, that was his weight, but he was like Kowalski, like twisted steel. Kowalski was never balky, but if that bastard latched onto you, you were finished. That was it. You're not getting away from him. And Dominic was the same too. Yeah,
what do they call it? Like sinewy, maybe is the word. Like not really,
I don't know.
Not massive.
Not massive, but they had ligament strength. It's like an octopus. You're not going to break it. You're finished.
Right. Yeah. Well, guys, I think that we're going to wrap it up here. And Nikita, I can't even put it into words, but talking about the wrestling of my childhood, it's just something I'll never get tired of. And thanks for a great journey back to a very special time in our lives.
Same here, my friend. I love it. I appreciate this opportunity. And listen, people, Benny is one of the great minds of wrestling. He knows. Listen to Benny. The Playa. He's the man.
Playa. And I want to thank, we had quite the chat room there. I'm sorry I didn't really get a chance to answer any questions, including Sal Scarpa, which maybe he'll come back next week. We can talk to him a little bit. But thanks for everybody who joined us in the premiere episode of When It Was Real. We do have some great stuff planned for you, so please hit the like and subscribe buttons, and you won't miss any episodes on this great Monte and the Pharaoh YouTube channel. And the channel is literally a treasure trove of excellent content. I mean, you want an interview with any old school wrestler, it's on there somewhere. Atlas, Backlund, I mean, you need Tony Gurria, Barry Windham, Magnum TA, you name it, it's on the channel. So we'll be back next week to take you on another awesome trip in the Wrestling Wayback Machine When It Was Real. So for the great Nikita Breznikov, this is Benny Scala, the one and only Playa. Now, I'm also the Poet Laureate of the Monte and the Pharaoh channel, so I'm going to leave you with this. When wrestling nostalgia you crave to feel, tune in on Wednesdays from When It Was Real. Night, folks.
До свидания, товарищ.